Hello again, and welcome to Wine 101 on the road. Today, I'm down in the southern part of the Central Coast, and I'm with an amazing and definitely awarded winemaker, Curran. And we are here at her winemaking facility and barreling facility, and we're going to talk with her and hopefully find out some of the history of what has brought her here to this point, and seriously one of the premier winemakers in the world of wine. But in addition to that, being a woman, she's really a pioneer, and we're seeing a trend towards more and more women here, but she certainly is one of the most recognized and fun to be with person that we've ever met doing this thing. So I'm going to start, we're going to ask some questions, and hopefully you'll get a little bit of a better picture of what Chris is about, what their wines are about, and hopefully you'll have a good time. So without further ado, I'm Scott Sullivan, and this is Curran.
Thanks, Scott. Am I blushing? I mean, it was a very nice introduction. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I was here last year, and when we got here, they were tasting some wine. It looked like it was early in the morning, and what it turned out to be was it was juice from grapes, and it was Grenache. No, it was Gewürztraminer, and we were talking about it, and it made me realize there's a facet or an aspect that people don't even talk about when it comes to winemaking. We all have the finished product, and so we know what we like in, say, a Cab or a Pinot or whatever. But how do you know if it's going to be a good Pinot aged in oak, or if it's going to be maybe something that you should make a little lighter style? The key is in knowing when the grapes are ready and what they're going to produce as a wine, and that's where your experience and everything is kind of an untouched topic. And I'd like you to tell me a little bit about what you look for in juice and fruit in that process, or that side of it.
It's a very good question. It is a very it takes a little while to learn it in general, and then it takes a little while to learn each and every one of your vineyards. So what we do is at this stage, which we are in harvest right now, you can hear the crusher and the destemmer press running in the background out there. Basically what we're looking for are really ripe tannins before we pick. So we want to make sure that the tannin structure has ripened along with the sugars. Sugar ripening is one thing people always talk about, being able to pick at, I want to pick at 23 bricks. But if your tannins are really green and the seeds are green and the pulp has not slipped off the seed, then the grape really isn't ripe. It's not physiologically ripe. It is ripe as sugar, as far as sugar goes, and as far as being able to ferment that to alcohol. But it won't taste proper when you get the finished product. A lot of wineries, we do private tastings here. We are not open to the public. And a lot of wineries do not allow you to taste unfinished wines. And the reason for that is most people don't understand what a wine is supposed to taste like at a young age. And that is not denigrating at all. I mean, sure. It's just because people don't have the experience to do that. And so for them it tastes, they get a lot of grapefruit, they always say. And it's... They're going through a phase where what we look for right now in wines as we're fermenting, we just look for flaws. We know basically that we picked at a proper time, we processed it correctly, and what we look for are flaws. We actually do have a Gewürztraminer in tank right now. I tasted it yesterday morning, because you have to taste them every day. And I noticed that it was starting to get a little funky, which means that it basically doesn't have enough nutrients. So we added some DAP, diammonium phosphate, and this morning it's back in line. So that's basically what we're doing right now. And you could start to see how great a vintage or mediocre a vintage is at this phase. So it's a very early phase.
But that's crazy, because we don't think of it as people that drink the finished product. Like I said, we don't think of it in those terms, and that's what makes the truly great wines, is people like you with the experience, the knowledge, and obviously the passion, that you can say, no, it needs a little bit of this, or it's not where I need it to be from a juice standpoint. So that's just part of the magic when we come to these places and meet these people. And I got to tell you, Chris has been doing this for a long time. but I believe you started. We have.
Sorry about that.
No, this is good. This is part of what makes this so wonderful is we have these winery dogs, and they are part of the family, and that's what I'm talking about here. This is like your family. This is your coming to your family's business, doing your things, and it's all part of from growing, from picking your vineyards. And so I want to go way back first. I want to talk about you started out in a different field. Maybe similar, but didn't you start out in some type of farming or agriculture or?
No, I went, I have 2 degrees. I have a pre-vet degree in animal science that I received from Cal Poly, and then I also have my winemaking degree, my enology degree that I received from Fresno State University. Hey, Breaker, sorry about that. My family is not behaving themselves. But it is very much a part of the family. So I didn't actually ever want to be a vet. I mean, I did when I was younger, but the closest thing that I could get to enology without taking food science, which they wouldn't then have given me a second degree for, was animal science. And I raised all sorts of things while I was growing up. So you could say I came from ag. But, and I guess I still am in ag. This is agriculture after all. But you have to be here. We're here 7 days a week most of the time. We don't take vacations. So these barrels that you see behind you, everything that you see in tank, this really is our family. The dogs, people that come and visit us. And that's one of the great things is that the reason why we don't have a tasting room is so that people can have an intimate relationship with these wines that we have in here, and we allow people to taste fermenting juice and things out of barrel, things that aren't finished yet, things that might not be perfect, because they're not perfect yet. While they're aging, it's like anybody else aging. It's like any other child, you know, they're going to go through weird phases. They're going to be wonderful at times, and then you just go, oh my gosh, where did this come from, you know? This thing is a terrible twos, you know, theoretically or supposedly that way. Syrah is classic for doing that to you. You'll taste it one day, and the next day you have no idea. You said, I just tasted that. It was beautiful. So Syrah we age for about 5 years in barrel. So it gets through all of those. I'm sorry that this beast is obnoxious. Anyway, so this really is it's a lifestyle. It's not a job. You come to it, you do it. We love it, and when we do have to go away on trips, we do it, and we were very happy to get home.
So you're taking animal science. You go then into winemaking. Did you start making wine initially, or did you start in the fields with the fruit? What's your history? How far back do you go? And tell us a little bit about the jobs you've held and how you got to be here.
Well, I worked with Bruno D'Alfonso, part of the D'Alfonso Curran, while I was going to school at Sanford Winery. He was the winemaker at Sanford for 25 years. And then when I graduated, I scored a fantastic job of assistant winemaker at Cambria Winery, right out of school. And then I left Cambria after a few years to start up a brand new project called Kohler Winery, which is right next to Fess Parker. And then I left to start up another brand new project called Sea Smoke Cellars. I'm sure you heard of that one.
We know that one.
After about 8 years with Sea Smoke, I went and did a 3-year stint at Foley Winery. And at that point, we just decided, Bruno and I, to focus strictly on this thing. So that's been pretty much my entire wine career. So I've worked with some great people, had some great experiences, made some really wonderful wines, I think.
We think.
And hopefully continue to do so, and will continue to do so.
So you're here, and you're southeast of Lompoc, you're west of Buellton, Solvang. We're north of the range from Santa Barbara Mountains. And so what this valley is known as?
We are actually in the San Ynez Valley.
San Ynez.
Even right now, we're still in the San Ynez Valley. We're in the San Ynez River area. So what we have behind us are the Santa Rita Hills, And then on the south side of us are the Santa Rosas. And so this San Ynez will actually eventually funnel out into the Lompoc Valley. But
Okay.
right now we are in San Ynez Valley. Our address here is Lompoc, but we're smack dab in the heart of Santa Rita Hills AVA. But there's two portions of it. There's the north side, which is the Highway 246 corridor,
Okay.
and then this side, which is the Santa Rosa Road corridor. They're two different, entirely different, they should be two entirely different, potentially four entirely different AVAs. The south side, the San Ynez or Santa Rosa Road corridor, is much more heavier soils, clay loams, and then the north side is much sandier. They're old sand dunes on the north side. Very little clay is on the north side, and so there's a lot more drainage over there. So we do make two different types of wines, and it was obvious when I worked at Foley. We definitely made different wines at Foley than we do here, and from this section.
Okay, so yeah, we drove in, and you're driving along the valley, and we were even discussing it. The south side, the Santa Barbara side, so to speak, is a completely different look than the north side. The north side almost has a white, chalky look to it from across. You assume there's some sand in it from the sediment and so forth. But yeah, one side of the river is completely different than the other. But all along this valley, you source fruit, and what you like being here? What drew you to this area, or is this where you've always been?
I did most of my growing up here. I grew up in San Ynez, and actually the town of San Ynez, so I was really fortunate to be able to get a job here. Didn't think that was going to happen, because when I was growing up, there were only a few wineries here in the valley, and they were all owner-operated. So I was basically assuming that I was going to be up in Santa Rosa, Napa area. Didn't think I was going to be able to find a position down here, and found quite a few of them actually. But it is, we do have a lot of people when they're driving you around and giving you a tour of the area, will point to those white hills as being limestone. They are not limestone. It is actually it's a calcareous type of a soil, but it's diatomaceous earth. And grapes do not grow well in diatomaceous earth. So people look and they point that out. Look at the, limestone cliffs. We don't have any limestone other than, road base in Santa Rita Hills. But we source our Pinot Noirs and some Chardonnay and some Pinot Grigio from Santa Rita Hills, and all of our other grapes, our Spanish varietals, our Italian varietals, our Syrah is all sourced, or are all sourced, sorry about that, from the San Ynez Valley, and also Los Alamos Valley, which is not quite yet its own AVA. So hopefully one of these days it will be.
That brings up a good point. They make a large variety of wines, and the neat thing is they're newer. A lot of them are newer grapes, or what I'm calling newer, rather than the old traditional, Chardonnay, Cabernet, Lock, or whatever. So there's some phenomenal stuff they're growing, and learning as they go. Actually, even in this valley, with some of you have a rosé we'll talk about in a few minutes.
I started my label, the Curran label, in 1997 with Pinot Noir, and then I lost my contract with that Pinot, and so I decided to start making some Syrah. That was back when Syrah wasn't even heard of practically. It was a long, long time ago, when you could still sell it, and so that's how that started. And then in 2003, while Bruno was still at Sanford, he started the Badge label, and that was strictly for making Pinot Noir. And finally, we come to the D'Alfonso Curran label, and that was started in 2007 when we decided to make our lives a little bit easier. We actually formed a corporation so that we could just be under one roof, and rented this facility that we're in now. And that was about the same time that we decided to also make our lives easier and get married. So we just figured it was a lot easier to go ahead and have all of this under one license, one bond, rather than having all of, we probably had about 40 different licenses at the time.
Wow.
So That's sort of the evolution of how this comes about. People will always ask us, well, can't you just streamline this and put it under one label? But, having, Sangiovese, Pinot Grigio, Spanish varietals, Italian varietals, Burgundian varietals, Rhone varietals under one label just doesn't make any sense. So we've been really hesitant to do it.
Well, they're labels that we just talked about. It's a diverse lineup, but it's actually, they're all uniquely fantastic. They really focus. It's not a recipe. You go to some wineries and there is a hint of that style in every single wine made, and these are actually just delightful. They have one in particular that caught my eye last year, and we've been talking about it ever since, and I guess it's still a rarity here in the area, and that would be this Grenache Gris. So tell me a little bit, or tell the audience a little bit about that one.
Grenache Gris is actually, there are 5 accepted mutations of Grenache from Spain. These are all Spanish varietals. A lot of people think that they are French varietals from the Rhone region. They are grown there. They migrated over the Pyrenees from Spain. And so, obvious one is Grenache, the red Grenache that we're all used to and we all see. There also is a Grenache Blanc, which is a green grape. There's Grenache Gris, which is a rust-colored grape. Looks very identical to Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio. And there's Grenache Rouge, which has all 3 of the different colored berries in it, except the red berries are translucent, so you can see through them. So it's a very odd-looking cluster. And then they also have, in Spain, a Grenache that looks identical to the red, except it's called Pelo for hair, and it has these fine little hairs underneath the leaf. So they actually think there was actually a real true crossbreeding when we brought the Labrusca vines over to replace rootstock after the phylloxera deal in Europe, and because the Labrusca vines have the hair underneath the leaf in order for them in the humidity to not dry the plant out. So the Grenache Gris, there are about 4 acres planted of it in the country that we know of. We are about ready to bud some more over because some people got hold of part of my my contracted stuff, and so now I'm getting less, and so we're having that. It's okay, it's going to a good person, so everything in its place. But it's a really special varietal because there was only about a half an acre to an acre planted up in Alexander Valley. It was grown by this very old farmer, and I called him up one day and I said, I want to buy cuttings. And so we just did that. We bought cuttings and planted 3 acres down here.
And they're doing really well.
They're doing really well, and people really want them. And so now, it was like Grenache Blanc. When I started making Grenache Blanc, we bought, Camp 4 had 11 acres planted. At the time, there were 21 acres planted in California, and we bought all 11 acres of the Camp 4, and nobody had ever heard of it before, except for Tobless Creek. And so then all of a sudden the next year, everybody wanted that Grenache Blanc. And so there are probably now about 600 acres of Grenache Blanc planted in California. So these are on the rise. They're wonderful wines. They go with entirely different things. So something genetically, when you have a color mutation, the best thing to explain what happens is sort of like if you have a black lab, a chocolate lab, and a yellow lab. They're all the same breed. They just have a color mutation, but they have different personalities because of it. And they have different ways of reacting to things. In these Grenache mutations, basically you do have drastic changes of aromatics and sort of what they go with. I'm stepping on a dog. So you see up here, you'll see the Grenache Gris, and you'll also see a Grenache Blanc. Grenache Blanc is wonderful, goes great with really spicy food. The Grenache Gris, a lot of people think the rosé, this is a dry rosé, and a lot of people think that rosés are summer wines, which is great. We drink a lot of this as well. It's summertime, it's perfect. Icy cold, but it actually really goes really well with fatty foods. So oxtail, ossobuco, veal cheeks, sweetbreads, stuff along those lines. And so therefore, it really is a great winter wine.
It sounds like it. Yeah, the acid breaking up the fat or working together anyway.
It's a very tannic wine because Grenache actually has a lot of tannins in it. So Grenache Blanc and Grenache Gris are two of the biggest tannin white wines. Viognier is another white wine that's very high in tannin, not quite as high as Grenache Blanc. And Gruner Veltliner, another highly tannic wine. And so you have to find those tannins down. Because if you didn't, it would be, you'd question. I mean, if you tasted some of this stuff in black glass, if it wasn't fine, you wouldn't know you were drinking a white wine.
Wow. Along the lines of the different varietals, we didn't get into my favorite, and I would like to.
Okay.
There's two, actually. The Chardonnay is just phenomenal, and she has a real knack for making Pinot. Last year we went through some of the barrels, and I think, my goodness, I didn't know, she has barrels from every year. And some of this stuff is in oak a long time, and that's got to be a capital expense. I mean, to keep it in the barrel rather than to let it age off. So tell us a little bit about your passion and the product that the Pinot is.
So we both really are known for our Pinots. We do age our Pinots differently. What happens when you age a wine longer in barrel is we call it a polymerization reaction of the tannins. So basically your tannins will grow into these longer chains, which makes it softer in your mouth, and it makes it a lot more approachable. You can lose a little bit of fruit, so you're not going to get those really big fruit bombs, but we like that soft tannin in the palate, that really creamy finish, rather than those edgy tannins. What we'll do is when we run people through, and I think we ran you through last year, you probably started with the 12 Pinot Noir, and everybody loved the 12. The 12 is actually one of the best vintages that I think I've made since 2004. But I then taste people on the 10. I skip 2 years, and I say, do you notice the difference in the backside of the mouth? And everybody can taste it. When you're tasting that, and it hits you, and somebody explains it to you, and you go, yeah, it's not as edgy. It doesn't have that bite in the back. Everybody loved the 12, but when they tasted the 10, they go, yeah. Can you just put the two together? Not legal, but unless it's a non-vintage wine. So we do have that, and we do age our Pinots. We'll be bottling the 10 probably in another 2 months after harvest. And so the 10 will be in for 4 years in barrel before we bottle it. And that's usually, we go 3 to 5 on Pinot. We go up to 6 on Syrah. So we really do, and then our Spanish varietals, we age for at least 5 years as well.
And they have some wonderful Spanish Tempranillo that I think is fabulous. And every wine here, it's a labor of love. You can taste it and you can tell, and the varietal speaks to you rather than the winemaker, and that's no slight on you. That's actually a compliment. We just absolutely enjoy coming here. It's an honor, really, because she is one of the premier winemakers in the state and the world. We want to thank you very much for talking to us. We also want to thank Bruno. He's a hoot, and I get the non-corporate thing.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't work. But like getting back to what you were saying about that, and that each varietal and things taste different. We are interventionist winemakers. We, do fining. We have our own crossflow filter. As you look over here, you'll see that we have our own bottling line. That is really, I think, one of the keys to controlling the quality of a wine, is that when we get something to tank and we blend it and we think it's ready to go, and then we taste it and we're getting ready to bottle it the next day, we will go ahead and say cancel bottling and let's do one more thing to this wine before we put it to bottle. People that don't have their own bottling lines and have to use mobile bottling lines don't have that luxury. They're usually booked out 8 months in advance. So
Wow.
if you miss your bottling date, you miss it. And so it's like playing football and you're right there almost to the end zone and you just fumble the ball on the 1 yard line because you can't take it that extra yard. And we have that luxury of doing this. This was Bruno's original bottling line at Sanford, brand new in 1983. So back then it was about $150,000. That would be about a $600,000 piece of equipment to replace now. So you can see why small wineries can't afford that.
Sure. They've got a co-op and such.
Yes.
But it's remarkable talking
Sorry
with you.
if I kept talking too long.
No, you didn't talk enough. She's a hoot. You should see the outtakes, I got to tell you. But thank you again very much.
Thank you guys for having me. Hopefully it was slightly educational. I don't...
More than that, and we love it, and we also love you guys watching Access 13, and we appreciate it, and we'll see you down the road.
Thank you.